but it's caused the big problems in the mining industry. The prices weren't high enough for the miners to go to work or to produce gold, so it's exasperating the thing in the future. It's affected a lot of people, and as we put in our ad, because they suppressed the price of gold, it helped make the other financial markets in the U.S. dysfunctional. Interest rates and the dollar weren't really where they should be. Had gold been able to reflect its true price, and it led to the chaos and financial collapse we had.
I certainly believe you're correct in saying that it's a major player in the overvaluation of the dollar, but that whole thing was discussed by the Fed chairman Greenspan back in the 90s, and a lot of people knew that there was a disconnect beginning to broaden. It wasn't something that was being addressed. In fact, it was being made worse throughout the 90s. And somebody mentioned in one of the shows that I watched about Larry Summers actually adding fuel to that fire, and so did Paulson, and so did Bernanke, and I mean, they've all added.
Dale, let me explain that here, because it was part of our testimony, and I think it's very important how this all started. And Robert Rubin, who was a Treasury Secretary, before that was, when he first started in the late 80s, he was the top guy for Goldman Sachs, J. Aron in London.
Yep.
And he borrowed gold from the central banks because he realized he could borrow it cheaply at 1% instead of paying 8 or 9%, and he funded Goldman Sachs' operation in London while he was there. Other people learned what he was doing, and they would borrow gold, and they borrow gold, pay the central bank 1%, sell the proceeds in the physical market, and use the gold for his operations. And it became a thing, and which I won't get into now. It had to do with then long-term capital management got it, and then they blew up, and so on. But he took this, when he became Treasury Secretary, and the suppression of the gold price, he did it on a much bigger scale, was the essence of his, quote, strong dollar policy.
Yep.
That's what it was. And so he carried on, and Larry Summers, who's now Obama's top economic advisor, who then became a Treasury Secretary, did the same thing. Now, Summers knew all about it, because when he was at Harvard, he co-authored a paper called Gibson's Paradox in the Gold Standard, which is you can find it, they got a site, or it's on the internet, of the relationship between gold and interest rates. In other words, if you could suppress the price of gold, you could keep interest rates less than what they should be. So this all fits together, and then further Treasury Secretaries in the Goldman Sachs connection with Paulson and even others, anybody who was in there, whatever administration, did the same thing. But now they're running out of enough physical gold to continue, and that's why the gold price is going to explode.
And you knew that this reckoning day was on the horizon here, Bill, because they were running through the amount of printing and the amount of just money in circulation, and then the interest rates that are combined with that amount of money are not reflective of the kinds of relationships gold should have with capital or with these fiat currencies. So the disparity was growing in enormous ways, and the relationship wasn't growing. So what you're saying is, over the last period, 1,100, 1,200 for gold, and 22, 20. I've heard as high as 5,000, Bill. Especially with the printing presses running 24/7. But that's just America. We're not talking about the way this has affected the euro, the Swissy, the British sterling. We can go around the globe and say that these same forces are wreaking havoc on almost every fiat currency issued.
Yeah, well, the exciting part about it is, and yes, our consultant nailed it. Frank Veneroso is pretty well known in the gold world. Was a speaker at our Ghana African Gold Summit in Durban, South Africa, May 10, 2001, and he said in 7 to 10 years, these central banks are going to be running out of gold to do what they were doing. And sure enough, the European central banks were selling 400 to 500 tons per year the past decade. In the last 3 to 4 months, nada, nothing. Now, what's fun also, if I can bring attention to your listeners, is that the gold world tells people that the central banks have 30,000 tons of gold in their vaults.
Yep.
Our work shows through our consultants they have less than 15,000 tons. The difference is what they've gone through to suppress the price. And now they're hitting the wall, as we can see by the European central banks with their stopping of their selling. It's only now the gold cartel is running through their stash, what they have left, and then eventually it's going to hit the wall and the price explodes.
Well, now, and also there was a crunch point where Gordon Brown, is the exchequer in Britain, sold out a big chunk of British sovereign gold.
115 tons.
Yeah, now that's a huge amount for the lowest price that he could get. And somebody said in inflation-adjusted terms, it was the cheapest sale of gold in history.
Yes, and what happened was, in my website, on the day before, this is how crooked this is, Deutsche Bank, who was part of the fraud, at least back then, told their clients in the day before, and I have it in writing, again, in my website, that the price was going to collapse the next day. And then they announced this sale, which just buried the market, and the price collapsed. And we've been told, but it's pretty well corroborated by people, that this was done to bail out the bullion banks that were shorts that were in trouble, and that's why he did it, and to curry favor with the big money crowd.
Well, there was
of course, one of the things with that sale at the time is that the central banks are empowered to sell under acts of secrecy. It's an international agreement between central banks whereby when they sell gold in large quantities or buy gold in large quantities for whatever reason, ostensibly to do with shoring up economies, etc. It's supposed to be done for the good of the economy, nothing to do with helping out private banks, but it's supposed to be done for economic reasons and balancing treasury numbers, etc. That this can be done without recourse to the London bullion market's physical settlement. So that's the only time in law, international law, when physical gold can be settled and the market does not need to be told and it does not need to be recorded as occurring. That way, and for one simple reason, central banks often transfer large quantities of gold between each other, and it would affect the price dramatically and affect the markets dramatically. So ordinarily, central banks sell huge quantities of gold off-market. Sometimes they'll make a small announcement that they're making a private sale or something like that, but that it's not to affect the market or the market price. The way that Gordon Brown actually did it was that he came out and made a public announcement, and I was working with some guys on the bullion desk at a particular bank in London at the time that the announcement was made, and he kicked $40 off a $300 price in a single day. So if you think of that as a percentage, he knocked about 14-15% off the price of gold in a single day when he didn't even legally need to make the announcement to depress the price. So he went out specifically to lower the price of his own sale.
That's right. That's right on the money.
Which that's a crime, and it's a theft against the British public, because that was supposed to be in their treasury, and now it is anybody knows. But there's other things that have happened in this marketplace where some of these central banks have actually leased out their gold. The physical gold is no longer in their possession, although they claim it to be part of their asset class. But that gold has ended up in other coffers, and they're also claiming it as an asset. So you're getting double booking on certain assets through the leasing program. And many people believe, as you've pointed out, I think, Bill, on GATA, nobody's even sure if Fort Knox has gold in it. Nobody's done an audit on it, and nobody's been...
No audit since outside independent audit since 1955. We have no idea. We believe that it's encumbered in some way, and that actually got us, right now we're suing the Federal Reserve because we've tried to get some information on these terms called gold swaps with changes of gold with different countries, and we've caught them in some of the minutes. They forgot to redact it. And we've gone to the Fed, and President Obama wants transparency, so we said, okay, let's be transparent on this, and they came back to us and said, we're exempt from telling you this is secret information. Secret? It's supposed to be the America's gold. So what happened was when they said that the end of the year, this past year, we were suing them in district court under the Freedom of Information Act to get what the truth is.
Well, so now this whole thing is going to unwind, and there were already problems back in the 70s, and they knew that the leveraging of gold as a backing for currency was going to. They had already jigged the fiat currencies, and there was no backing. Nixon had to retreat. The world system just started going crazy from there, because what happened in my view, from historic research, is as soon as the gold standard was gotten rid of in the Bretton Woods Agreement, Bretton Woods II, there was no longer any real transparency, and everyone stopped paying attention to the relationship gold had directly on currencies because they figured it didn't have any importance or